TNA recently got some of its highest viewerships of all time, and there's a reason why the X Division has been relegated to web matches. I mean, I like Sabin and Shelley, I like the X Division, but is that a reference for what the wrestling fan base as a whole wants? No.
Because TNA started doing its best numbers because they relegated the X Division to web matches. You know, you didn't, as I pointed out in the first part of the video, part 1, this is part 2 obviously, people were actually tuning in while the X Division matches were on. Not as much as the main events, but people were still tuning in to watch. You know, there's no evidence, you have no evidence to provide or to show us why the X Division is a detriment to TNA. You're just saying, look, there's a reason why. What's that reason?
Likewise, is a bunch of YouTubers on here actually wanting TNA to get rid of some of its biggest names a reference to what the fan base as a whole wants? I doubt it.
You know, not many YouTubers are actually saying that and using YouTube as a point of reference, but we are actually fans and our opinions do count. You're one of us. You're not exactly a casual fan yourself. But, you know, I don't know of many casual fans who would want to see a 50-year-old Kevin Nash or Sting. You know, yeah, there are guys out there, but there are also guys who want to see the young guys. You know, when you're making the assumption that that casual fans want to see the older guys and not the younger guys, and you're also making the assumption we want to see these guys fired. We don't want to see these guys fired. We want to see the younger guys get put over. Look at, you know, Cute Kip and BG James, they're still around. What happened to Sanjay Dutt and Petey Williams and Loki? Talented young guys who are now gone, who are probably worth more to the company than those two old guys.
Another assumption is that these new young guys are even ready to lead. I mean, people like to assume that because he's a TNA original and because he has a lot of talent in the ring, that AJ Styles should be the next big thing. He should be the next face of the company, the next big leader. But the thing about that is that seniority and in-ring talent don't necessarily constitute leadership. I mean, I like AJ Styles. He has a lot of in-ring talent and he seems like a cool guy. But the fact of the matter is that when I try to objectively look at him on the screen, there's nothing about his demeanor, his behavior, or his body language that strikes me as being a leader. He's too reserved. He doesn't come out at the screen at you, you know? I mean...
You know, people say AJ Styles should be the face of the company for a few reasons. One, because he's one of the most talented guys there, and because he's Mr. TNA and been there forever, but also because he's one of the most popular homegrown wrestlers. Being the most popular homegrown guy, he should be able to give this company some identity. When you put Kurt Angle or Booker T or Kevin Nash or Jeff Jarrett or well, maybe not Jeff Jarrett, or Mick Foley as your champion, people don't think about TNA. They think, you know, when I see Kurt Angle, I think of WWE. When I see Sting, I think of WCW. When I see AJ Styles, I think of TNA. It's something fresh. It's something new as well. And I still don't understand this leadership thing. I mean, face of the company, I think AJ Styles should be given a chance to be the face of the company and see what happens. I don't think things would fucking bomb. But leadership, what do you think? He's a backstage leader and tells everybody what to do and motivates people. You know, if AJ Styles was given the belt, I think a lot of the younger guys would think, hey, I can be just like AJ Styles, and it would actually raise morale, for the younger guys at least.
Take off your assumption glasses for a second.
What the fuck are assumption glasses? What are you talking about?
And just look at him, you know? Does he strike you as being the next Rock? The next Austin, the next Shawn Michaels, the next Hogan, whatever.
You know, wrestlers aren't, you know, born stars. They're not just there and they're all of a sudden a star, you know, straight away. It takes the appropriate push and the right gimmick and, you know, put into the right feuds and storylines and all that thing. Hulk Hogan was automatically a massive star everywhere he went. Same thing with Shawn Michaels. He wasn't always just a top guy. If you look at him, he, you know, progressed through his career. He started off a bit more reserved and he, you know, got more confident. Steve Austin, who would have thought when Steve Austin was in the Hollywood Blondes, and honestly, without having seen what he became, if you were to go back in time and have a look at him, without having known he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, how many people would have thought he could have been the type of star that he became? You know, it took him a long time, and it took when he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, it took the right push, the double turn, with him versus Bret Hart.
Now, I know the idiots are going to spin this.
Much like you're spinning the opinion of many people on YouTube to suit your argument.
Let's make this perfectly clear, okay? I am not against pushing the young stars. I'm for pushing the young stars. All I'm doing is I'm responding to what appears to be assumptions going around here that has resulted in a mentality based on substitution, all right? Take Angle out, put AJ in. Take Steiner out, put Saban in, right? All I'm saying is that I reject that assumption and I reject that mentality and instead prefer to go with a concept of integration.
And I think that's great. I agree with you. It's about integration and not substitution. But you're making it seem like we all think, or that old YouTubers think, that it should be substitution and not integration. That's not our opinion. We just want to see the young guys integrated into the main event scene. Look at Lockdown. You had Sting, 50 years old, probably hit his peak, 15 to 10, 15 years ago, versus Mick Foley, who hit his peak about 10 years ago, in the main event of a 7-year-old company. It doesn't make much sense to me. You'd think that a new company would have new faces, something new to draw the fans in. Mick Foley versus Sting have had matches in the early 90s in WCW. So yeah, it's not really integration if the same old guys are still in the main events.
Right, let's see what these young guys can do, all right? The main event scene, they're super important. They're our bread and butter.
They're not exactly the bread and butter. TNA didn't start making money because ratings skyrocketed with these veterans coming in, or because buy rates shot through the roof with these veterans coming in. If anything, buy rates have gone down since all these guys have come in. It's a bit hard to tell. They've either stayed the same or gone down since the start of the company. But saying I'll tell you what made got TNA to the point of where they are, where they're either losing a little, making a little, or just breaking even. It was from international television syndication deals, which means outside of the United States they sold their TV show, running live pay-per-view events from places outside of Orlando, and house shows, something they could have done without the veterans and maybe drawn. If the product was better, maybe they'd draw more fans without the bigger names. But, do they help draw to the live events? Yeah, they probably do help draw to them. But does that mean they need to be put into the main event to still be able to draw? No, that's false. And are they making back that money they're getting paid? I don't know. We can only assume, and I'm guessing that's what you're doing, assuming that TNA is making most of its money from the older guys. And I'm not going to assume otherwise, but I'm not going to assume that is exactly the case.
All right, there are big names, but let's see what these young guys can do. All right, kind of like Survivor Series 92. The main event scene was still Savage and Flair, but in the mid-card, you had Shawn Michaels versus Bret Hart fighting for the World Heavyweight Championship. It almost, in hindsight, seemed like a trial run, Let's put these guys out there, let's see how the crowd reacts, let's see how it goes.
But these guys aren't getting the trial run. Samoa Joe got it, but are we seeing Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles for the World Heavyweight title in the mid-card? No, we're not seeing that. We're seeing Mick Foley versus Sting. Sorry if I keep going back to that.
Right? It wasn't about substitution. It wasn't about fire Flair, fire Savage. They're old, and put these young guys in because the nerd said so.
All wrestling fans are nerds, really. But, as I said, not many of us, if any of us, are saying fire the veterans. The thing is, in 1992, well, with the example you used, in 1992, Flair would have been about 43, and Macho Man Randy Savage 41, I think, and they were still, at their age, some of the best wrestlers in the world. Two guys who I think, two of the older guys, two of the veterans in TNA who I think should be wrestling with the younger guys and helping put them over are Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett. Why those two? Because those two guys can still go. They can still have good matches. Guys like Scott Steiner, Sting at 50 years old, Kevin Nash, Mick Foley can't work. And you also can't get the type of mileage you can get out of guys like Mick Foley or Sting or Kevin Nash or Scott Steiner that you can with Jeff Jarrett and Kurt Angle. And putting the veterans in the mid-card isn't going to make them any less popular. Yeah, sure, less TV time means they probably won't get as much exposure, but these young guys, my problem with your argument is these young guys aren't given the chance to show if they can cut the mustard. Samoa Joe is the only one I can think of in the past few years who has been given the chance. And look at Rhino. A few years ago, when they didn't have a lot of the young guys they have now, Rhino was pushed to the moon and he had a lot of buzz around him, and everyone was excited about seeing him win the TNA title. Then he won it, and then he lost it to Jeff Jarrett not long afterwards. But, that's the story of TNA. He won't listen to what they tell him. He won't listen to what they say.